two fraternity brothers become best friends.
Ed and Butch were drawn together.
They became so close, they were like brothers.
Until the consequences of several bad decisions destroy both of their lives.
The brutality of it alone was very shocking.
What kind of monster can do that to his best friend?
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. When Butch Pratt and Ed Swiger begin their freshman year at Thiel College, they both have big dreams for a bright future.
They had high goals, and they were focused on achieving those.
Butch is known as a jock, playing baseball and football. He's also the life of the party.
Butch was so outgoing and so charming that everyone, guys and girls, were attracted to Butch.
He was a very helpful, caring, loving boy.
Ed has a different character. He is smart, driven, and focused.
Ed really had aspirations of having a political career.
He had that intense confidence. He wanted to be a senator.
Ed is also dedicated to bodybuilding and kickboxing.
Ed was fanatical on his workouts. You could go to the gym and watch Ed do a 500-pound bench press.
On the surface, Ed and Butch seem like unlikely companions. Ed comes from an Ohio family with strong political connections. Butch was raised in a working-class steel town outside of Pittsburgh.
Butch was blue-collar, Ed was white-collar. Butch came from a very tough background. Ed came from more of an affluent household.
Despite these differences, the boys immediately hit it off.
They became inseparable.
They did a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing. They started visiting each other at their hometowns and meeting each other's families.
Six months later, they pledged the Delta Sigma Phi fraternity together.
We were Animal House. We just wanted to have a keg and get the girls. Butch and Ed absolutely felt that they were going to be lifelong friends.
But the two have no idea their carefree college days are numbered, and dreams of a bright future will soon turn into a terrifying nightmare. As fraternity brothers, Butch and Ed are having the time of their lives. They spend almost every moment together.
Butch saw Ed as a role model. This guy's got it together, being the guy up front and in charge.
But there's something about Butch's easygoing personality that Ed admires as well.
Ed was a little bit more reserved. He saw in Butch, here is this guy everybody liked, and he wanted to be that guy.
By sophomore year, the best friends' personalities seem to rub off on each other. Ed becomes more social, and Butch becomes more studious, like Ed, and begins to dress like him too.
Instead of the jeans all the time, now it was more dress pants or button-down dress shirts.
When they're juniors, they move off campus together. And Ed, always padding his resume for a future in politics, is elected treasurer of the fraternity.
Ed really saw student government as his initial stepping stone.
One day, Ed crunches the fraternity's budget numbers and discovers they're in serious debt.
The fraternity was broke. Our bills were overdue. We had no money to do anything.
Ed, as the money guy, starts thinking of ways in which we can repay the loan.
Ed brainstorms about how he can turn the situation around. Then, he tells his buddy Butch his scheme for saving the fraternity from financial ruin. He wants them to steal electronics from their own fraternity brothers so they can collect the insurance money.
Ed told Butch, we're gonna do something that's not gonna cost anybody anything and help the fraternity out.
Butch is taken aback at first, but after Ed convinces him his plan is good for everyone, his best friend goes along with the idea. It's the first of many bad decisions they'll make together.
Butch did look up to Ed. He wanted to help him out with this burglary.
Ed and Butch trusted each other.
According to their theory, there was no reason to worry because the insurance would cover everybody's loss. This was going to be a win-win situation. Their plan was to make heroes of themselves. These guys thought that the burglary was going to be something that would benefit everyone.
Butch didn't think it was stealing. He thought it was for a good cause.
Seemingly unaware of the consequences, they begin to think it's a brilliant plan. But Butch and Ed couldn't be more wrong.
They had no clue what a bad idea this really was.
They also don't know that their bizarre scheme would lead to a series of life-changing decisions. Butch and Ed stage the robbery when everyone is away during spring break.
Ed held a position of trust within the fraternity, and therefore he had a passkey access to the rooms.
Once inside, the boys quickly take electronics from their own fraternity brothers and load dozens of stereos and VCRs into their car.
There was no forced entry, so it would become difficult, A, to discover immediately, and B, the equipment's not traceable. So it's certain that Ed thought of this when he conspired to commit these burglaries with Butch.
They stash the goods at their apartment off campus.
They thought their plan was perfect. There was no way they were ever going to get caught.
The robbery seems to go off without a hitch until their fraternity brothers return from spring break. Ed and Butch have vastly underestimated how their fraternity will react to their crime.
Everybody gets back, they're like, hey, where's my stuff? People were really upset.
Every room had stereo equipment and television stolen out of it. The first people who came down to the house to commiserate with us and empathize with us were Butch and Ed. And Ed's helping all these people fill out forms to get insurance money for this.
Meanwhile, back at Butch and Ed's place off campus, Ed's girlfriend, Kathy Brandt, stumbles upon some of the stolen goods at their apartment.
Didn't take a genius to put two and two together. Where do you come up with 18 stereos and 18 televisions?
Although Kathy is shocked, she doesn't say a word to Ed or anyone else.
She was not real happy, but Kathy was really in love with Ed.
She didn't want to ruin the relationship by telling about the burglary.
The fraternity brothers call the police, who begin an investigation. Almost everyone in the fraternity is questioned, including Ed and Butch.
The police theorized this was an inside job because there was no real forced entry.
Nobody suspected Butch or Ed.
There's not an ounce of suspicion cast on these guys.
As the newly elected president, I'm doing everything I can to find out. I was going to the police on a daily basis.
With police sniffing around, the boys' earlier optimism fades. Now they are terrified they'll get caught.
Ed and Butch started to panic. If caught, this is something that's going to ruin both of their future plans.
Believing that the law is closing in on them, the best friends panic. They ditch their idea of rescuing the fraternity and decide to sell the stolen goods to get rid of the evidence. Ed asks his impressionable younger brother Michael for help.
Michael thought very much of his brother. He wanted to help him.
They called up Mike, who was attending college in Cleveland, and they thought the best way was to get rid of all the evidence.
Michael takes the stolen goods back to Ohio and sells them. And the three boys, Ed, Butch, and Michael, divide up the money. Back in Pennsylvania, the investigation stalls.
There were no arrests made because they had no witnesses, suspects, or they hadn't recovered any of the stolen items. So the case went cold.
Now the boys are confident they won't get caught and are relieved, thinking they've dodged a major bullet.
They probably felt pretty good. The summer goes by, and they think they're getting away with it.
But little do they know, the robbery will come back to haunt them and eventually pit the best friends against each other in a way no one could have imagined.
How do you even live with yourself? Here was a guy doing this to his so-called best friend.
I was shocked. Everything was a lie.
It's beyond belief how any human being could do that to someone.
That was something that was just bone-chilling. It was the ultimate betrayal.
Ed and Butch breathe a sigh of relief after they sell the electronic equipment that they stole from their fraternity brothers. No one suspects Butch or Ed's involvement, and the best friends think they are finally in the clear.
The Greenville police had no information to make any arrests.
All the evidence was gone, so there really wasn't anything to come after Butch and Ed at this point.
By the start of their senior year in the fall of 1987, Butch and Ed are focusing on graduating and making a new start. As time goes by, the robbery becomes a distant memory, and the boys grow closer together.
They had to be thinking, we just gotta get out of here. Once we get out of here, it's done and over with, it's behind us.
Meanwhile, party boy Butch tries to stay on the straight and narrow and hopes to go to business school and get an MBA.
Butch wanted to be a professional. He was going to get his master's in education or business.
Ed plans to go to law school and has his eye on a future Senate seat.
Ed had tremendous political aspirations. He was not going to let anything stand in his way.
In the final months of school, both remain focused on their goals and are involved in student government. Ed is class president and Butch is on the student council. They are both big men on campus, heading towards an even brighter future.
Butch and Ed were off and on to bigger and better things in their mind.
But as graduation approaches, Ed becomes noticeably stressed. He starts having a lot of problems with his girlfriend.
It wasn't uncommon to hear Ed and Kathy hollering and screaming at each other. Ed was scary. Ed was domineering.
Then, one day that spring, while working out, Butch and Ed meet 34-year-old Linda Carlin, a well-to-do woman who manages a local furniture store. Linda is instantly drawn to Ed.
Linda Carlin was attracted to Ed because Ed's a well-built 20-year-old guy.
She was a cougar. It was an ego trip for her. Hey, I can attract a younger man.
Soon, the two begin a passionate affair behind Kathy's back.
Ed liked her because of her power, her position, her income. She could buy him anything that he wanted.
Linda Carlin had a beautiful home and a swimming pool and a Cadillac and, nothing but the best for Linda Carlin.
She represented the next stepping stone to move him forward.
Ed was in it for more what benefits can I get out of this. He thought a lot of himself and felt that he could influence people, including Linda.
And he's right. Linda showers her lover with expensive gifts, including a Rolex watch and a car.
It was a Jeep limited edition. She could give him the finer things in life.
Ed and Linda seem like a perfect match. Both are ambitious and driven to get what they want. But others question their clandestine affair.
Butch didn't see the attraction, but, to each their own, I guess.
It was the age difference thing. It was like, wow, it's not like 2 years apart, and it's like over 10.
Eager for Ed to become part of her world, Linda hires him, Butch, and others from the fraternity to work at the furniture store.
Pretty soon, Linda Carlin's getting all of us jobs. We're cheap labor. She's paying us under the table. It's the perfect situation.
Perfect for everyone except Ed's college girlfriend, Kathy Brandt, who suspects something is going on.
Circumstances for Kathy and Ed were drastically different. when Ed met Linda Carlin.
Ed eventually breaks up with his college sweetheart in favor of the more experienced and worldly Linda. But Kathy does not take the breakup well.
She was not real happy. She was furious.
But hell has no fury like a woman scorned, and Kathy Brand is scorned. Ed has dropped her, and Kathy wants to get even.
Kathy's plan for revenge will stun both Ed and Butch and send shockwaves throughout the college campus.
Kathy is one of 4 people that know about the burglaries.
So she decides the best revenge is to tell Ed's fraternity brothers what he and Butch did.
Kathy comes to me and tells me it was Ed and Butch that ripped off the fraternity.
And she said, it was them. I saw the stereos and the TVs. You don't know it, but it was Ed and Butch who robbed you.
Well, you could hear my jaw drop. We all just looked at each other in disbelief. We're pissed. We're really mad. People want to go after him that night. I just said, let's wait till the morning.
Shocked and angry, the fraternity brothers notify the police the next day about Ed and Butch's robbery.
It was like wildfire around campus about what had happened.
When Ed hears that Kathy has told police about the robbery, he is furious and angrily confronts her.
Ed threatened her. Ed could get people to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do.
He convinces Kathy to go to police and tell them it's not true.
Kathy obviously was under duress, the threat of Ed.
She recanted her statements to the police, saying that it was not true, in fact, made up.
Without Kathy's testimony and no hard evidence to go on, police don't reopen the investigation and the best friends are once again off the hook.
Once she recanted, there was no other arrows pointing at these 2 guys. So the whole thing just kind of disappeared.
But with their fraternity brothers, the damage is done, and they're both kicked out of the fraternity.
These guys are supposed to be our friends for lives, and they did this to us. I don't want anything more to do with them. I don't even want to see them on campus.
I take steps as the president to blackball these guys from the fraternity.
Ed doesn't care about being shunned from the fraternity. He is only concerned about how this debacle could affect his goals.
Ed is becoming very paranoid about his future.
But Butch, on the other hand, is devastated that his fraternity brothers want nothing to do with him.
This is something that he originally thought that was going to work out for everybody, and now it has backfired, and now he is out of the fraternity, something that, was very important to him.
He was disappointed, and he didn't want to talk about it. I'm sure his conscience bothered him.
Ed's selfish attitude really bothers Butch, and the strong bond between them begins to crack.
Ed is now showing a side of himself that Butch is stepping back and going, who is this guy? Ed and Butch's friendship started to suffer at this point.
With graduation on the horizon, both boys focus on their future. But Ed and Butch are about to make even more shocking decisions. Ones that will ultimately lead to a horrifying showdown between the best friends.
It just got to the point where it spun out of control. It was too late to go back.
It's beyond all comprehension. It absolutely repulses me when I think of what happened.
You wouldn't wish this upon your worst enemy, let alone your best friend.
After Ed's ex-girlfriend, Kathy, suddenly recants her statement to police that Ed and Butch were responsible for the fraternity house robbery, the boys are not charged.
I have come to learn that she did that because Ed threatened her if she didn't recant that statement.
On May 14th, 1988, they both graduate from college. Butch feels a special sense of accomplishment.
He's the first one in our family that went and that did graduate. So we were all proud of Butch.
But for Ed, it's a different story. As he gets ready for law school, his older girlfriend Linda comes to him with some alarming news. The furniture store she manages is having major financial problems. But she comes up with a shocking plan to fix the problem. Like Ed's scheme, it involves insurance money.
A way out of it would be to burn it to the ground and submit an insurance claim and to try and make it look like an accident.
According to fraternity brothers who worked for Linda, the store's financial problems were her fault. They say she was pocketing money from the store.
She was living far beyond her means, and Linda's been embezzling. She needs to make some of this proof go away. The financial records were located in the upper floors of the furniture warehouse.
The best way to get rid of these books is to come up with an accidental fire. We'll get rid of all the evidence.
She needs somebody to burn the building. She talks this over with her closest confidant, Ed.
Linda said, we're going to burn down this furniture warehouse and get the money from the insurance company.
If she wanted Ed to do something for her, he would do it.
Just as he did when he planned the fraternity house robbery, Ed sees easy money and agrees to help his girlfriend out.
I think Ed's motivation was some money. He was living a high life.
But Ed needs someone he can trust to help him with the dirty work, so he asks his best friend Butch.
Ed wanted Butch to be involved in this arson fire, putting total trust in each other. Don't tell on me, I won't tell on you.
Ed mentioned to Butch, you know, this is easy, this isn't like the burglary.
But Butch doesn't want to be involved in another one of Ed's schemes. And he's shocked and horrified that his friend would once again put their futures in jeopardy.
And it's at this time where, you know, Butch starts seeing, wow, it is a wake-up call. Now he wants me to get involved with arson. He didn't want to see these decisions ruin his life.
I think he was afraid. Enough is enough, and he has to put his foot down.
After having already narrowly escaped getting caught for the robbery at the fraternity house the year before, Butch wants no part of Ed and Linda's scheme.
He really didn't, because Butch didn't want to go to jail.
He's very concerned. This is going to ruin his whole future.
And Butch starts to realize that Ed is no longer the kind of person he wants to be friends with.
There was a side of Ed that he finally could see clearly, and it was not a good side.
Butch decides he has no choice but to distance himself from Ed. He even moves home for the summer.
He did not want any contact with Ed whatsoever.
Ed is angry and shocked that Butch won't help him out. He's used to calling the shots in their friendship.
Ed was furious with Butch, but Butch knew right from wrong.
And even though Butch has moved away, he can't escape the brutal impact of Ed's next criminal act. Under increasing pressure from Linda, Ed decides to go ahead with the arson plans without his friend Butch. But he knows he can't commit the arson alone, so he once again turns to his brother Michael.
Michael was a student over in Ohio. He knew someone that could possibly make this fire look like it was an accident.
Michael was influenced. This was his big brother. It's the guy he looked up to. Hey, I need your help. And then they could make a little bit of money.
On May 22nd, 1988, Ed, his brother Michael, and one of Michael's friends, armed with flammable paint thinner, meet at the furniture store warehouse, and the building is set on fire.
Ed felt it was a perfect crime to burn this to the ground, and it possibly be ruled as an electrical fire.
It's totally torched. The place is up in flames. It's gone.
But when investigators check it out, they know right away the fire was no accident.
Immediately there was some suspicion this in fact was an arson fire. And the first thing that you look at is motive, checking financial records.
As the arson investigation deepens, Ed and Butch become two of the prime suspects, along with Linda.
Ed and Butch had been working there off and on, and their names came up in the investigation.
The already damaged friendship is now put to the ultimate test.
I can't even begin to imagine he could do that to his best friend.
I just can't believe he did it. I can't believe the whole thing.
Ed is furious after Butch refuses to help with his and Linda's scheme to burn down the furniture store in order to collect insurance money.
The fire occurred at 1:30 in the morning.
The police looked at this and they knew it was arson.
Because Linda manages the store and Ed is her boyfriend, both are considered suspects and are brought in for questioning.
I think they looked at Linda Carlin right away, saw her lifestyle, and kind of figured what was going on here.
Both Ed and Linda deny any involvement.
Ed is cool, calm, and collective during the interrogation.
Ed felt that he would never get caught. Otherwise, they wouldn't have committed this crime.
Since Butch had also worked at the furniture store, police show up at his home to question him.
Butch asked me to walk the dog because I think he was embarrassed at this whole situation, and he couldn't talk to the police with me there.
Despite what's happened between them, Butch still feels a certain loyalty towards his former friend. So he tells police he doesn't know anything about the arson.
This was his best friend. He knew how important Ed's goals were to him, and he knew by testifying against him, he would not achieve those goals. There's no way. Roles were reversed. Ed would throw Butch right underneath the bus.
But Butch is caught off guard when the police also press him about the fraternity house robbery a year earlier. Police think Kathy may have lied to them when she recanted her story.
Butch is being interviewed. They not only talk about the arson, they want to bring up the burglary charges. And this is where we see Butch starting to really panic.
Butch cracks under pressure and confesses to his role in the crime. He also goes on to tell police the whole story, making it clear that the burglary was all Ed's idea.
When Butch admitted to it, he implicated Ed. I think this was eating at him. He had to finally get this off his chest.
He knew it was wrong. He was disappointed in himself and because of what he did.
After Butch comes clean, police charge him with the fraternity house robbery, but he soon posts bail. Because Butch implicated Ed, police bring him in for questioning about the fraternity robbery. But Ed tells police Butch lied and denies any involvement.
Ed denied everything. He was in control.
With only Butch's word to go on, police do not have enough evidence to charge him, but the investigation continues. Even though Ed is off the hook for now, he is enraged that Butch has told police about their previous robbery.
At that point, that was the end of Butch and Ed's relationship. There was a lot of sense of betrayal on Ed's behalf, but Ed was not going to go down quietly.
Ed was not going to let anybody come in between those goals.
Ed begins frantically leaving messages for Butch at his home, hoping to convince him to clear his name in the fraternity robbery, but Butch refuses to take his calls.
And Butch said, I got into enough trouble, I'm not getting in no more trouble.
He wanted no contact with him. He would not return any calls and speak with Ed.
He knows this guy is not his best friend anymore.
But Ed is not about to let Butch simply walk away from the past.
Ed dug himself in such a deep hole that he was just going to see it all the way through, and he hatched his next scheme.
And Ed's next scheme is beyond belief. Far worse than the fraternity house robbery or the furniture store arson. Meanwhile, Ed is determined to come up with a way to talk to Butch. He finds the opportunity when he runs into his and Butch's mutual friend, Teresa Wakulczyk, who coincidentally has been dating Butch.
She's good friends with Ed, but Butch was dating Teresa at that time.
While catching up, Teresa tells Ed that she's invited Butch to come visit her for the weekend. And for the scheming Ed, He sees their rendezvous as a perfect opportunity to arrange a face-to-face meeting with his former friend.
He knows that Butch will not voluntarily talk to him, so Ed then comes up with an idea of trying to lure Butch to speak to him in person.
Ed tells Teresa that he and Butch had an argument and that he needs her to help them reconcile.
She was told that Butch was being unreasonable and he wasn't answering any of his phone calls, and it was important that they talk.
Teresa agrees to trick Butch into seeing Ed because she wants to help the old friends make up.
They had no idea what was in store for Butch except, a chance for those two to meet.
Meanwhile, Butch boards a Greyhound bus in high spirits, totally unaware of the plan that is now underway.
Butch had made arrangements to take a bus over to Akron, Ohio, where he would be picked up by this girl.
He said, "Ma, I want to send her flowers and let her know that I'm coming."
He was excited about going, getting away, was just going to forget about everything.
Teresa and one of her friends pick Butch up at the station, still naive about Ed's real motive.
They came up with the story that they were going to a party in the woods. Butch had no clue that Ed was behind this idea, or else he would never have gone up.
The girls drive through a remote area. Then suddenly, Teresa asks her friend to stop the car so she can go to the bathroom.
They agreed that they would have Butch sitting on the passenger side, one girl in the center and the one girl driving. And under a ruse of the girl having to go to the bathroom, Butch would have to get out of the car.
And as Butch got out of the car sped away.
I'm sure he was startled. Why are they driving off and leading me?
He's probably thinking, all right, this is some kind of joke. What are you pulling on me?
But it's no joke. In fact, Butch gets the shock of his life when Ed and his brother Michael emerge from the woods. Not in Butch's wildest nightmares could he imagine the horror that awaits him.
We never knew that he was capable of such evil.
I can't even begin to imagine the brutality.
After luring Butch to an isolated area, Ed emerges from the woods and confronts his former best friend. Ed is hell-bent on persuading Butch to go back to police and tell them that he wasn't involved in the fraternity robbery.
I can't imagine the horror that he must have felt when he saw Ed.
Butch was definitely at that point afraid of Ed. He wanted no contact with him.
He was afraid of what Ed would do.
A key thing would be recanting anything that he said about Ed being involved, because if he did not, there goes his future plans.
A furious Ed confronts Butch, and when Butch refuses to recant his story that implicates Ed in the robbery, Ed gets angrier and angrier.
Ed became enraged, and a fight ensued. It just got to the point where it spun out of control.
With Ed's brother Michael looking on in shock, the two ex-best friends are at each other's throats.
Any type of incident like this is shocking, how something so minor could escalate into such a serious thing.
But what happens next is beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Ed suddenly pulls out a gun and bashes Butch in the head with it.
Ed had just kind of lost it. Here was a guy doing this to his so-called best friend.
I'm sure Butch tried to give him a fight, but there wasn't any compromising with Ed.
Butch goes in and out of consciousness as Ed continues to savagely beat him, until Butch succumbs to his injuries and dies.
This is Ed's opportunity to get rid of the guy that has the evidence, the guy that can link him to the robbery, and this is what he has to do to finish law school, to be that senator that he wanted to be.
This was the way that Ed shot Butch up.
It was the ultimate betrayal.
At that point, Michael is totally astounded by what he had just witnessed, this horrible beating and death of Butch.
But Ed manages to convince his brother to help him get rid of the body.
Ed and Michael handcuff Butch behind his back, and then they tie his ankles together with a necktie.
Then they throw Butch's lifeless body into the trunk and drive back to Pennsylvania. When they arrive, Linda is there waiting for him and wants to know if Ed succeeded in convincing Butch to recant his story to police. She has no idea the encounter turned deadly.
Linda inquired, "Where's Butch?" And Mike said, "He's in the trunk." And at that point, a terrible smell permeates throughout the car, and she knew that he had died. Linda was scared at this point. Linda thought they were just going to talk, that this wouldn't happen.
Terrified they'll get caught, Linda suggests they drive to a remote area in western Pennsylvania where she used to live and bury Butch there.
Ed used a shovel to dig the grave, and they placed Butch in the grave with the handcuffs and his legs tied. And then Ed jumped up and down on the body to force it down into the grave further.
This is his best friend. The brutality of it, the intensity of it, he's a monster.
A few days later, when Butch doesn't return from his trip, his family begins to worry.
We went to the bus station. He never got off the bus.
I thought definitely there was something wrong. Nobody knew where Butch was.
Butch's mother calls Teresa, the girlfriend he was supposed to be visiting, and tells her Butch is missing. Shocked and not knowing where Butch is, Teresa panics and lies to her.
Teresa said, "Oh, he never arrived." And I said, "What do you mean he didn't arrive?"
She was like, "He's not here, he never came."
Next, Butch's mom calls his former best friend Ed. He also lies to her.
I was told maybe he went fishing. Maybe he fell in the water or something.
Desperate to find her son, Butch's mother even calls his old fraternity brothers.
She had asked me if I had seen Butch, and I just got the worst feeling in my stomach.
At that point, he had just vanished. His mother contacts the local police and reports him missing.
Soon, Ed goes off to law school at Temple University as if nothing ever happened.
I don't know how that guy worked or slept, but he's back at school, and he's doing very well.
He was going to just move right on, furthering his education, become the lawyer that he wanted to be, make the big bucks.
As the months go by, the investigation into Butch's disappearance stalls. Could Ed literally get away with murder?
Ed never dreamt of getting caught. He always figured he was smarter than everybody.
At the end of his first year of law school, Ed is caught up in his new life and breaks up with Linda.
Ed really wasn't in love with Linda. He was using her.
Ed warns her to keep her mouth shut about Butch's murder.
Ed threatened her. She knows of his involvement in these crimes.
And knowing how he brutally murdered his best friend, she's terrified that Ed will try to kill her too.
Linda is scared, and she feels she's going to be the next one in the grave.
It's a terrifying realization. Linda finally decides that the only way to protect herself is to go to the police.
He threatened the wrong person for the last time.
She tells police about the whole ordeal that Ed had killed Butch.
She also implicates Ed's brother, Michael, and confesses to her part in the furniture store arson and to helping dispose of Butch's body. Linda is arrested but agrees to lead police to where Butch is buried. Nearly 16 months after he was brutally murdered by his former best friend, police find Butch's body.
One of the troopers stuck a shovel into the ground and moved some earth, and there was Butch's knee. And he was still handcuffed behind his back. His feet were tied with a necktie at his ankles.
Police immediately break the horrifying news to Butch's family.
He says, "Well, I have to tell you something, and you're not going to like They found Butch. He was buried on a farm, shallow grave. And of course I cried.
I just sat there for a long time, crying.
Meanwhile, Ed, who's now in his second year of law school, has no idea that Linda has gone to police and that they found Butch's body.
He had no conscience. So he was going to go on with his life while Butch laid in the grave.
He really thought that he was going to get away with this.
But Ed's world suddenly comes crashing down on him. Police arrest him on campus at Temple University on October 5th, 1989.
Ed refused to make any statement to the police whatsoever.
The 23-year-old is charged with the kidnapping and murder of his former best friend, Butch Pratt. Butch's family is even more devastated when they learn it was his best friend who savagely beat him to death.
And it was Ed Swigert that did it to him. It was his roommate from college, his friend Ed. I just can't believe he did it.
The loss of Butch was such a tragedy. The brutality of the murder is beyond my comprehension. It turns my stomach.
During his trial in 1990, the ever-cocky Ed expresses no remorse whatsoever.
He claimed it was an accident, that a fight had ensued, and Ed Butch had hit his head on a rock. But it was contrary to the evidence.
The jury doesn't buy his version of events. Ed Swigert is sentenced to 43 years to life for aggravated murder and kidnapping. Linda Carlin is convicted of conspiracy to commit kidnapping and arson and is sentenced to 25 years in prison.
She led a lifestyle putting on airs of her wealth, material possessions, and it was also superficial because deep inside, she was an evil person.
Ed's brother, Michael Swigert, served 16 years for involuntary manslaughter and kidnapping for his role in the murder and the furniture store arson.
Ed brought so many people down with him. And for what? His goals.
It's been nearly 25 years since Butch's tragic death and Ed's violent betrayal. But time hasn't healed the family's pain.
His kindness and his goodness and coming over and putting his arms around me and giving me a kiss. Tell me he loved me.
I always thought that if I got married, that Butch would be in the wedding. He wasn't. Ed saying that, oh, you're like a brother, and then for him to just turn like that, I can't believe the whole thing.
None of us could imagine what this would come to. I mean, here are two guys that we thought were the best of friends, and here's something that the worst of enemies wouldn't do to each other.